There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you've moved your body. It's the exhaustion of a mind that never truly stopped. Not once. Not during breakfast, not in the shower, not in the middle of a conversation where someone is talking to you and you're nodding, but somewhere behind your eyes, a completely separate courtroom in session, replaying something you said 3 days ago, examining the tone, the word choice, the 2-second pause that probably meant nothing but felt like it meant everything. You know this feeling, that's why you're here, and I want you to know something before we go any further. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive, too neurotic, too much. What's happening inside your mind is not a flaw in your character. It is, in the most literal sense, a feature that was installed for a reason, and tonight we're going to understand that reason together. Not to fix you, not to hand you a 5-step checklist, but because understanding, real, deep, honest understanding, is often the first thing that actually feels like relief. So let's begin where most people are afraid to. Picture a radio that you can't turn off, not one playing music you hate that would almost be easier. This one plays your own voice on loop, narrating, analyzing, predicting, and guessing every frequency of your life. You wake up and it's already running. You try to sleep and it gets louder. You're in a room full of people laughing, and somewhere underneath your own laughter, it's still going, cataloging, referencing, building a case file on a moment that lasted 4 seconds this morning when someone's reply felt slightly shorter than usual. This is not anxiety in the way people casually use that word. This is something more architectural, something built into the structure of how you move through the world. Psychologists have a name for the brain network responsible. They call it the default mode network, a system that activates precisely when you stop focusing on the outside world. Its job, in healthy doses, is beautiful. It allows you to imagine the future, process the past, build empathy, understand other minds. In people who overthink, this network doesn't just activate, it dominates. It runs at a frequency that drowns out stillness, that colonizes rest, that turns what should be a quiet Tuesday evening into a reconstruction of a conversation from 2 weeks ago that you still haven't been able to fully file away. But here is what I want you to sit with. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing something extraordinarily sophisticated. The tragedy is not that it's broken. The tragedy is that it learned to do this for a reason that no longer exists, and it never got the memo that things changed. There is a distinction that the late psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent her entire career drawing, a distinction so important that once you understand it, you'll never confuse the two again. The difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection is moving. It's the mind picking up a problem, turning it over, extracting something useful, and setting it down. There is momentum in reflection, a direction, an arrival point. Rumination is different. Rumination is circling. It's returning to the same wound not to heal it, but to trace its outline again, as though, this time, tracing it will finally produce an answer. You don't replay the argument because you enjoy the pain. You replay it because some part of you genuinely believes that if you think about it hard enough, long enough, from enough angles, you will eventually find the thought that makes it okay. The sentence that resolves it, the realization that closes the loop, that thought never comes, but you'll be waiting for it at 2 a.m., and you'll still be waiting at 3. Nolan Hoeksema's research revealed something that should be taught in schools. Rumination doesn't process pain. It preserves it, like amber. The emotion doesn't move through you when you think about it this way, it crystallizes. And the longer you circle it, the more entrenched the neural pathway becomes, until the spiral itself starts to feel like home. Not comfortable, but familiar, and the brain, your brain, my brain, all of our brains, will always choose the familiar over the unknown, even when the familiar is suffering. This is not weakness, this is neuroscience. Now here is where we have to go somewhere that might feel uncomfortable, not because it's dark, but because it's true. Most overthinkers did not arrive here by accident. Think about the environments where hypervigilance is trained. Not necessarily traumatic in the dramatic, visible sense, though sometimes yes, but more often in the quieter, subtler sense. The household, where you learned to read the room before you walked into it, where you scanned a face at the dinner table before you decided whether it was safe to speak, where love felt conditional in ways no one ever said out loud, but that your nervous system recorded in microscopic detail. Or maybe it wasn't home. Maybe it was school, the particular cruelty of adolescence, where one wrong word, one social miscalculation, one moment of being too much or not enough, could shift the entire architecture of how you belonged. And you learned because you were smart, because you had to, that if you just thought far enough ahead, if you just anticipated, prepared, rehearsed, you could minimize the damage. You could stay safe. Your brain did not teach you to overthink because it was malfunctioning. It taught you to overthink because once, in a world that felt unpredictable, thinking ahead was the only form of control available to you. This is what psychologists call an adaptive response. It was intelligent, it was protective. It was, in the truest sense, a survival mechanism designed by a mind that was doing its absolute best with what it had. The problem, and this is the tender, complicated part, is that the threat eventually softened or disappeared or transformed into something that didn't actually require this level of surveillance. But the mechanism remained, like a soldier who was never told the war ended, still guarding a border no one is crossing anymore, still scanning, still alert, still preparing for impact. And now you're doing it at the grocery store, in a text message, in a meeting where someone glanced at their phone during your sentence and your mind has already written 3 competing theories about what that means. There is a specific flavor of overthinking that I think deserves its own moment, because it doesn't get talked about this precisely, and a lot of you are going to recognize it immediately. It's the kind that is almost entirely about other people, not about your own future or your own decisions, but a constant, exhausting simulation of other people's inner world. What they're feeling, what they thought of what you said, whether something was taken the wrong way. You replay conversations not because you're narcissistic, the exact opposite, but because you care so deeply about whether you might have caused harm without knowing it, and the uncertainty of not knowing is something your nervous system refuses to simply let go. You draft a message and rewrite it 4 times. Not because you can't find the words, you know exactly what you want to say, but because you're trying to account for every possible way it could land, every possible mood they might be in when they read it, every connotation of every word that might color the interpretation. Psychologists recognize this pattern as a form of hypermentalization, an overdeveloped theory of mind, where the capacity to imagine what other people are thinking and feeling becomes so finely tuned that it operates involuntarily, automatically, even when no one asked it to. It is, at its root, a profound form of empathy, an extraordinary sensitivity to other people's emotional worlds. But without an off switch, empathy doesn't just connect you to others, it absorbs you into them. And you lose the boundary between caring about how someone feels and being responsible for how someone feels. The cruelest irony of this is something I think most overthinkers already know but rarely say out loud. The people who will spend an hour and a half thinking through how to best support a friend in pain are usually the last people to extend that same quality of attention to themselves. You will walk someone through every possible reason why they are not a burden. You will build a case with patience and precision and genuine love, and then at midnight you will lie in the dark and compile the evidence for exactly the opposite conclusion about yourself. Same mind, different rules. And that asymmetry, that gap between the compassion you give and the compassion you allow yourself to receive, is one of the quietest, most persistent wounds that lives inside the overthinker world. We haven't even gotten to why stillness terrifies you yet, or what the white bear experiment reveals about every time someone told you to just stop thinking about it, or what it means that your anxiety almost never fires randomly, that it knows, with surgical precision, exactly what you love and exactly what you're afraid to lose. There is an experiment that a psychologist named Daniel Wegner ran that changed how researchers understood the overthinking mind forever. He gave participants one simple instruction: do not think about a white bear. That's all. Just don't let it enter your mind. They couldn't do it, not really. They managed it briefly, barely, the way you hold your breath underwater with effort and a quiet sense of countdown. But the moment the suppression lifted, the white bear didn't just return. It came back harder, louder, more insistent than if they had never tried to push it away at all. The act of suppression created a debt, and the mind always collects. This means that every time you've sat with clenched teeth telling yourself to just stop overthinking, every time someone who loves you but doesn't quite understand said just stop worrying about it, you were neurologically guaranteeing the thought would flood back worse than before. Not because you're weak. Because that is literally how suppression works inside a brain like yours. So the answer was never to fight the thoughts. It was always to change your relationship with them. And here is where something quietly shifts, because once you understand that the overthinking was never your enemy, once you see it clearly as a protection that outlived its original threat, you stop being at war with your own mind. You stop treating every spiral like a malfunction that needs to be corrected and start treating it like a message that needs to be read, understood, and then gently set down. The question stops being, how do I make this stop? It becomes, what is this thought actually trying to protect me from? And does that danger still exist? Most of the time it doesn't. What remains is a habit, a deeply practiced, neurologically reinforced habit, but a habit nonetheless. And habits, unlike wounds, can be slowly, honestly, compassionately rewired, not silenced, rewired. If this found you at the right moment, you are not alone in this. And if you want to keep going deeper, subscribe. There's more waiting for you.